All right, class, welcome back. Week 7, Chapter 6. This week we're going to talk about local storage, and we're going to kind of use it as to emulate a server. Local storage is something that you can use, or any website can use to store data on your computer in your browser. And we're going to use that to our advantage this week. If you'll notice, I put my video below the chapter reading and the chapter videos because hoping they'll explain it a little bit better. And the video and their little project is a little simpler than what we're going to be doing for the actual assignment this week. But I'm going to try and walk you through that best I can. Self-test exercises this week, the programming exercise, which I'm going to cover, and the Chapter 6 quiz, which you got to accomplish. You will also notice that there's this load local storage function here. When you click on it, it should open up just like this, and this is simply a function that I want you to copy and paste into your JavaScript for this week. So you should have, oh, hold on. This week is going to be important that you use the node server.js file that we did in like week 2 or whatever. If you haven't been using it so far and everything's working, it's best to use it this week because it won't transfer data back and forth, and your local storage will disappear every time you refresh the page. So let's jump into, go to your folder wherever you're going to work from on your project this week. Mine is way down here, week 7, my code, my app. And once you're in here, you should have, you can just carry over those files that we started with. I haven't changed them at all yet. Just throw them into your thing and then go to File. Instead of going to Command Prompt, just open the Windows PowerShell. It's just a big blue command prompt. It's different, but it looks like it. And type node server.js. The server starts, and then you can go ahead and continue. Just minimize this, don't close it, so everything works. And then what you're going to want to do is open up a new tab and go to your main page. 127.0.0.1 semicolon to indicate the port, which is 8080. Now my main page is simply named index.html. If yours is something different, you're going to want to put a backslash and put the page name.html in here, and then hit enter. But if it's index like mine, just hit enter and it'll pull up your password page. This should be the first page of your project. And it should look something like this. Doesn't have to work yet. Not sure why mine is, because it shouldn't. But anyway, you should also have an about page that looks like this, somewhat like this. A patient info page with your labels and inputs, a few buttons, search, add, edit, and delete, and clear patient info. Your graph page should look something like this, but it's empty. And the recommendations page should look like this. This week we're going to focus on our patient info, making it work, and the password page. Now back onto the node.js. Make sure if something's not working, look up here to URL. Make sure it doesn't say file, it says the 127 address, because stuff won't work properly from a file. So we're going to start on the password page. We are going to, oh my goodness, do this. Shrink that. Let's see, list 6. Save all, refresh. Okay, now it doesn't work again. I just didn't refresh. All right, so on your index.html or your password page, the one with the passcode, it should look something similar to this, but we're going to add a few things. So in order for your buttons to do anything, you have to call a function when they are pressed. In order to do that, we're going to zoom in here and look at the buttons. So you should have your button, and you want to add an on-click event that calls a function. In this case, I called my function, or I named my function, add value to password. And for each button, it should add the value that is consistent with the button. So for 7, it'll enter 7. 8, it'll enter 8. And we're going to pass that number along to the function. That's one function. Down at the bottom, I added actually a reset button to my HTML page. A reset, I think you had reset and enter. I added backspace to mine and moved enter down to another table row. So your code, you don't have to add this backspace button if you don't want to. I prefer it. That way, if I type in 6 characters and the last one's wrong, I just backspace once instead of resetting the whole thing and typing it all over again. The on-click event I used for reset, I changed to make, man, how do I slide this over? There we go. That's better. I changed it so that you can, so the reset has its own function. On click, the backspace still uses the add value to password function, but obviously I add it's past backspace instead of a value like 0, 1, 2, 3. And the enter button calls the check pin function. So you have add value, reset, and check pin. Those are 3 functions that we're going to write. And seventhly, up on the body here, I have created an onload event. So like on click, if you click a button, on that click, it will fire off a function. Well, when you use onload, as soon as the browser loads the body, it will fire off this function called load local storage. And that is the function that I told you about earlier. Just go back to the course, pull this up, simply copy, open your JavaScript up, and paste it in. And that's all you have to do. This builds a database for you. I built this database for you. If you look at it, you can see that it's called patient DB, patient database, and it's got several patients in here: first name, last name, date of birth, password, a height, a weight, a height, a weight, a gender, and that's it. But that's everything that's on our patient data page. And there are a couple noticeable names in there. Their heights, weights, birth dates, and all that should be accurate. So just paste that in there, and we'll get to that when we get to the patient data page. But those passwords we will use to check against when we're doing our password. So if you don't type in one of those passwords, if it doesn't find it in that database, you can't get in. All right, so the first we're going to do is this add value to password function. We're going to make a function. Call it add value to, nope, not that. Call it add value to password. Again, you can name these whatever you want, but this is just what I chose. Let's see, add value to password, and the argument or parameter we're going to send to that function comes from a button, and the buttons can send different stuff. So every time a button is pressed, it's going to send that data to this function. Make sure you got your little brackets, and everything that occurs inside the function or the function's supposed to do should be inside those brackets. Let's declare a variable, call it current value or current val, and that's going to be equal to whatever's in the input, the password input or passcode input. So we're going to get that from the document, get element by ID, it's passcode, and it's passcode because on that input, that's the ID I gave it. So it's going to look for that ID, and then it's going to get the value. Then, if that value is 0 through 9, we want it to do something. If it's backspace, we want it to do something else. And we could have it do yet another thing if it's reset, but I just didn't set it up that way. So if button is equal to backspace, BKSP, then I want to do something. What just happened? Show you brackets. Everything that happens when that if statement should be in brackets. I want the current val to then be equal to the current value substring 0 to the length of the current value. So current val dot length, and then -1. So if the button is if backspace is pushed, it's going to look at the current value, whatever's in the input, and then it's going to figure out how long it is, and it's going to -1 from it. So it'll backspace the stuff. Take one off the end. And then we need to update the HTML. Get by D, pass. That's capital. It's not capital. What is going on? I think I hit insert. I hate when I do that. Passcode value equals current value. Fail. So in this, we're actually changing the variable. But you wouldn't be able to see that it's changing unless you update the HTML. I can show you more about that in a second. So that's if it hits backspace. If it hits anything other than backspace, then we want it to add it to that string or that variable or the element. Plus equals button. So this does a few things here, and let's save it. Save all. Somebody asked me why I do the save all. A lot of times when you're doing this, you'll bounce back from your JavaScript to your CSS to your HTML and another HTML and back and forth. If you forget to save one of the things that you're trying to change or fix in that process, then something's not going to act right. So I just always hit save all and then refresh my page to make sure it's working properly. All right, so a couple things. Remember I said this current value here, it will backspace and it'll take 1 off the value. So let's quick illustration here. If I type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I hit backspace, it takes 1 off the end, right? Like a backspace, perfect. This next line here, if I didn't have this here, in fact, let me delete it real quick. If I didn't delete it here, it would still update that variable, but it wouldn't reflect that on the HTML. So save, refresh, and let me back out. So I can type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then backspace. The backspace isn't working. And it actually is working. The value of that variable is changing, but it's not updating the HTML. So it doesn't look like it's changing. So that is why that line is there. And thirdly, this plus equals might confuse, so I don't know if you've seen any of this yet. So the plus equals, if I just had equals in here, save all, refresh, hit 1, and then 2, well, it's only keeping one variable in there because it's equal to 1, and then it's equal to 2, and then it's equal to 3. With the plus equal, what that does is allows us to just keep adding on, not adding together, but concatenating strings is what we're doing. And it just keeps making that string longer until you hit backspace. Refresh, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, backspace. It all works, it's nice. Enter and reset do not work yet. So let's do a reset real quick. Do you want to get rid of everything? CTION. Reset. And all you have to do here is document get element by ID passcode. We're just changing that value to nothing, right? So the value equals an empty string. There you go. So save all, reset. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hit reset, and everything's gone. Now in this case, there is no variable when you hit reset. So the variable is not saved or created until you click a button. So I guess it is. It's saved and created right now. There is a current variable value every time you click this button, or at least when you start clicking that button, and this alters it. When you hit reset, it doesn't alter that variable. It just clears the page. But the variable resets itself when you then start clearing, pushing buttons again. So there is creating, it's all the buttons and the reset button and the backspace button. So the only button left is enter. And what we want to do is check when somebody pushes in their passcode and hits enter. We want it to check and see, we want to check that database that we loaded. If it finds the passcode in there, let them through to the about page. And if it doesn't find it, we want to throw up an alert saying password's not valid or something like that, right? So let's do that real quick. Function. I'll call this check pin because it's really a pin and not a password. So this may get a little confusing because we have to declare a couple of variables here. The first one I'm going to do variable is PC for passcode. Get element by ID passcode, because that's what I called the ID. So the first thing it's going to do is going to go to the HTML into this input passcode, and it's going to pull out whatever's in there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that will become the variable PC. The next thing we need to do is look into that database that we have and figure out if there is a password in there. Well, we have to parse that database, right? And if you've gone through the book and the video already, you should have some idea of what I'm talking about. So what we'll do is make a variable called codes and use JSON parse to parse the local storage. Oh, dang it. Local storage. Get item. DB, patient DB. Why is this way over here? So we're going to grab that database, and that database gets loaded into the variable codes. And then we have to go kind of iterate through that database to look at each one of the codes and see if it matches what is in the variable PC that it pulled from the HTML. I hope this is making sense. I'm using a lot of abbreviations. I hate when people do that. So var I equals 0. We'll create a counter variable. var length or len length equals codes dot length. So we've got a counter variable at the I is going to be our counter. We're going to increment that as we go along. The length is going to be how many codes are there? How long is the codes variable? It's going to look at that database because it's now like a string, right? You JSON stringify, if you remember that from the reading. And then a for variable, a for loop. So I, and as long as I is less than the length, we're going to increment I. And while we're doing that, wait a minute, why are there two? Because one of those is for the function. So if the passcode is equal to codes I dot password, yeah, another bracket, then we're going to let it go to the about page. And if it goes through the whole thing, we don't need to do an else. If it just goes through the whole thing and doesn't see anything, it's going to throw an alert that the passcode is not working. The passcode is not valid. So this is kind of a lot. First, we could write this differently. Like var I equals 0. We could write this all in one line. I just chose not to. I'm hoping it makes it a little simpler, but I'm not sure if it does. So we've got our counter variable. I'm sorry, I should have zoomed it in. Here we go. So we have our counter variable, the I. And then we have another variable, len or length, which is going to be equal to the codes.length. And remember, codes is the stringified patient database. And then we're going to count. As long as our counter variable is less than the length, so it's going to have to look through all of them to get to be the length. And once it gets there, it stops. That's what a loop does, for loop. So it's going to look through the passcode value that we pulled off the HTML, and it's going to look through each one of the codes dot password. This is how we kind of index the database. So if you're looking at the variable up here, dot password, you can see will reference this one. So it's going to look through the database, and it's not going to look at first name, last name, date of birth. It's only going to look at passwords for each one of these iterations. And if this password matches what we put into our HTML, it will then relocate to the about page. Otherwise, it's going to tell you that it's not valid. So let's save all. Let me back out, and we'll look at our passcode here. Refresh. This first password is 123456. So let's try 75689. What is going on? Something's not working. Gosh, I hate when that happens. What did I break?
15 minutes later.
All right, I found it. If you look in my check pin, these little things, you just can't tell how it's going to affect the page. So that's a comma there. After len, it should be a semicolon. File, save all, refresh, and now it works again. So frustrating. Welcome to coding. All right, so we want it to check the database. It should all work. Let's see. Reset 584697. Enter. The passcode is not valid. Let me back out so you can see what I'm doing here. Passcode is not valid because I entered something that wasn't in there. Reset, and you can see that the first password is 123456. 23456. enter, and it takes me to the About page. Thank goodness. That is how the password page is done. I hope you understand about how it pulls information from the database, stores it in a variable, and then you can then check that variable for whatever you're looking for. We're going to do plenty more of that on the patient page. So we can close out the index page, and we will open up the patient page. Yeah, I need to change a few things, so I'll be right back.
5 minutes later.
All right, on the patient page, see, the only thing, if you've already done your fields, your labels, all that good stuff. Hopefully you did it correctly. But I covered that last week. So the only thing we're going to look at this week is the buttons. Down at the bottom of the page, we've got our button for searching. It's going to have an on-click search database function. The add and edit is going to have an on-click patient add function. The delete button should have a patient delete function. And then the clear patient info I have labeled as clear form. So you just need to add these on-click functions to your buttons so that when you click them, it actually does something. Don't worry about, I know you're probably looking at my stuff, if you can even see it because I didn't zoom in. You're probably looking at mine and you're seeing these I-classes and all that stuff. These are the icons. You don't have to have those, so don't worry about them. I know mine may look a little more confusing, but just focus on these on-clicks. And you should probably have an ID just because that way you can reference the button later if you choose to. But let's hop over into the JavaScript. So we need search database, patient add, patient delete, and a clear form. 4 more functions for this page to work properly. So we will hop over to the JavaScript. So let's do the easy ones first. We'll start out with the clear function. Right, yeah, clear form. And then we are going to just get all of those inputs and reset them to nothing, so you don't see anything. Document.get element by ID, and then you have to reference them. And I always forget, well, especially when you start dealing with this many, I always forget what I named them. So the first thing we want to look at is the first name. What did I name that? And I named it text first name. So we're going to get the text first name. We're going to change that value to an empty string. And we're going to do that for each one of the each one of those inputs that's on the page. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The male, female. We're just going to leave that one. We won't bother with that one. So 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we just change this, I think, text last name. And I gotta have to keep going back and seeing what I changed it. So text last name, that's right. The next one is dat birth date. So it's the input type of date. That's why I put dat. The input type, dat birth date. Dat birth date. Is that right? Capital B, lowercase d, yep. The next one is name is change password. The next one is text height and text weight. Text height, IGT, and weight. File, save all, and then I'll back out a little bit and make this a little bit bigger. So if I put in here Bob Smith, and I got a birth date and a password and a height and a weight, and then when I click the clear patient info button, did I refresh? I don't know. Nope. Refresh. No, I left the stuff in there. Oh, it's not changing the height and weight. Let's see, why not? It should be. But the others worked. Text, H-E-I-D-E-W. Oh, because those aren't capital. See, little spelling mistakes make the huge difference. So save all, refresh, move this back over. So Bob Smith, birth date, password, height and weight. And then when I click the clear button, it all goes back to normal. You can see the placeholders are still visible. And that is the clear function. All right, now we need to start adding patient data. But before, there's a couple of things we want to do actually before we add patient data. Let's say we put name and information in there. One, we want to make sure that the user fills out the whole form and not just like the name and not anything else. And two, we need to make sure that the patient isn't already in the database so that we can either add or edit based on whether they're in there or not. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a function called check user form, or that's what I'm going to call it. You can call it whatever you want, but it's going to check and make sure that all the boxes have data in them. And up until this point, you've seen the document.get element by ID to try and grab that value, but we're going to do it a different way that looks really odd, and it's like a jQuery kind of request for the information or the value of that information. So we're going to do function. We're going to call it check user data. And we don't need to pass it anything, just make the function. Actually, we check user form, sorry. And then we're going to check and see if the first name's filled and the last name and the birthday and the password. So it's going to be a giant if statement that contains a bunch of ands because we want them all to be true. So we're going to do if, and this is the funky way I was telling you about. If the first name val, instead of value, we just type val in the question marks because it's a function, jQuery. If that is not equal to nothing, and if the last name value is not equal to nothing. So we're not really checking for it being correct or the correct type. You should really check and see if it's text or numbers and all that other good stuff, but we're just checking to see if it's full. It's a little kind of validation, but not very good validation, if you know what I mean. And we can just copy this line and paste it a few times. I think we're not gonna check them all either. We'll check birth date, that birth date, and height and weight. We'll leave out the password, and we will leave out the gender. So if all of those things are true, and backspace this, so the last one doesn't need an and on it. If all of these are true, then we will return true. and then else. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me zoom in, scroll down. So this is the funky way I was telling you. I don't know if you could see it before, but parentheses $, and you got to have this little hashtag in front of the thing. This is the way jQuery. That's the way you request it using jQuery, rather than just the document get element by ID. I would say they both work, but I'm not 100% sure because I know when I did this the first time, it didn't seem to both work. It just depends on what you're requesting, I suppose, or how you're requesting it. And if it's not all true, we're just going to show, send a little alert up there. Well, let's see. All required information has not been entered. Let's save this. Save all. Back out. And that way, if I just put in a name in here and then go to add it, it'll show a thing that says all the requirement information has not been entered. Perfect. Then we need to we're gonna have to do two functions. It makes sense to do them kind of backwards, but when JavaScript reads this, or browser reads the stuff, it reads from top to bottom. So let's say we're gonna write some functions that call other functions. The functions that are called within other functions need to be written first so it can see them. Because if you write a function that calls another function and it's below it, it's like, what function are you talking about? I've not seen it because it hasn't got that far down the page yet. So right now we're going to do check existing patients, but that will lead us into doing another function that we have to put on top of it. I hope that makes sense. So we are going to see if there are any existing patients. And in this case, we're just going to check the first name and the last name just for simplicity's sake. If you were doing a big, a real one, you'd probably use something like a social security number, or you may could just check that value and see if anybody has that social. Or you may want to check more than just first name and last name to ensure that the person doesn't show up in the database twice. So we're going to reference a counter, and we're gonna loop through it with a counter, and we're going to reference the database. And I'm not sure, my videos have got a little messed up. So if you scroll to the top of your JavaScript, you'll see here that I have several global variables. And like I said, my videos got messed up. I've had to reshoot a bunch of things. You should have a run variable set to 0, a found variable set to 0, a variable that I call DB, which is going to be equal to the database. And basically this is the JSON parse of the local storage patient database that we've already loaded. This variable right here with this statement is going to pull the database out and stick it in this variable so that we can then reference that variable and iterate through it to find the data that we need. And then we have a patient variable that we will put information into later. So once you get these set up, scroll back down to check existing patients. So in this case, we're going to do a for loop to iterate through the database. For I equals 0, if I is less than the length of the database, I believe, yeah, database.length. So this DB we declared as a global variable, so all the functions can see it and change it. In this case, we're just going to count the items in it. And as long as I is less than that, it'll keep going through the loop. And then increment I. And each time it does that, we want to check the first name and the last name and see if it matches anything in the database. So we want to check the first name and the last name in the form and see if it is in the database. So we do that by doing if the $ text first name dot value or val is equal to the database with the index I dot first name. This is how we access the stuff within the database with the dot first name, last name, DOB, right? So if the value of what's on the HTML page is equal to what's in the database of first name and we're going to do last name, find the ands. So if the values on the page are equal to the values in the database, we're going to do some stuff. And if it's there, we want to ask the person if they meant to just edit the record or if they want to add something. So we'll do that by doing a confirm. And a confirm is just like an alert, but it has buttons on it. No. And down here, return. All right, so we're checking the what's in the form versus what's in the database on this line, and then if we find it, we're going to shoot up a confirm thing to the user saying, hey, we found a matching first name and last name record. Do you want to update the record? If they click OK on the confirm thing, it will then do this edit info function, which we have not written yet. And if we say no, it will return false and it won't do anything. And that's where it ends. But if we find it and it does this edit info, then it will go ahead and return true after the for loop. So let's see if we can demo that real quick. Back out. And so let's say, let me save all. I don't know if I did that or not. Save all, refresh. John Smith, he's got a birth date. 2,000, not 20,000. Password, height, weight, male. And we click add. It doesn't do anything. Oh, that's right, because we don't have the button actually pushed yet for the patient page. The actual patient page button is going to fire off the, where is it? Patient add, and we haven't done that yet. So we're going to kind of go on faith here. We're going to have to use these two, actually three, probably. Functions within another function and hope it all works out smoothly. Sorry, I got a text here. All right, so like I was saying, we're calling this edit info function within the check existing patient function. If we wrote the check info function down here, or the edit info down here, it wouldn't know what we were talking about. as it got to that code because it hadn't seen it yet. But if we run it up here, copy this, put it above the function, then it will know what we're referencing. So we're going to do our edit info function up here. And this is where we're going to use that patient variable. You can just actually copy and paste that patient variable into your edit info, because we're going to call it, reference it, and then we're going to do a for loop so we can look through the database, and we'll use we'll just use K this time just so you see that it works, I guess. So we're going to iterate through the length of the database and update K each time so we have a good index number. And then if the database, database K first name is equal to the patient first name, and last names are also the same. So we're editing, right? We're looking through the database to find this particular record. We know it's there. We just need to make sure the first name and last name match. And then we'll overwrite everything else. So if the first name and last name are the same, we are going to then grab that index number and store that in a variable. And then we are going to reference that the database entry with that number, and then change the height and weight. So we're just changing the height and weight. We don't need to change the first name, last name, and that's the only thing. You could throw password in here if somebody was updating their password. That would probably be valid. But I'm just updating the height and weight for this BMI calculator. That's what's important, right? And I'm just going to copy this, paste it in there, change this to weight, and change this to weight. Ooh, man, I must have hit the insert button because it's something crazy here. All right, db. Is that right? Okay, and then once we're grabbing that, and then we're grabbing the values off of the page, and we have to store them in the database, right? The patient DB database that's sitting in our local storage. We're going to change that. We're changing the height and weight in that record, and we're going to stringify it. And then we're going to update run equal 1. And that run is the global variable up here that starts at 0. When it does the run, it's run. It's changed. So that is the edit info. Now we can actually do the function that adds data, and it's going to use a couple of these things. It's going to it's going to check the form, make sure it's full, and then it's going to check and see if there's an existing patient. And then if there is an existing patient, it's going to give the user the option to either edit the info or not. And if there is no existing patient, then it's going to add it all to the database. This is getting to be a lot, isn't it? So, function patient add. if we're check existing patient, or yeah, so we're going to check. We're going to check and see if there's an existing patient with the last name, first name and last name first, and then we're going to check and make sure the user form is done. It seems like it should be the other way around. Not sure why I did it that way, but it works. So that's the way I'm going to do it this way. Check existing patient. So if check existing patient is true, and we made sure that when we did the check existing patient, wherever it may be, where are you? Just so make sure that it returns true if it's not already in the database. So if that is true, we're going to do some stuff. Make sure you add your things there, show it's a function. And then also if the check user form is also true, we are going to do something. And then if run is equal to 0, because we don't want to do it. Now that's why we change it in the edit info, because we don't want to add a duplicate record. So that prevents it. Simple prevention there. And I think I may have said that there are probably better ways to do all of this. This is just the way I did it. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but this is the way I did it, and it works. So if run is 0, so it's going to check all three of these before it does anything, any adding to the database. And this way, it ensures that you don't mess anything up. I like that. And we're going to reuse this patient variable from the edit info. And we're going to grab everything from, all this does right here is grab all the information straight from the page, from these inputs, and puts it in the patient variable. Then we want to push it to the database. We're pushing that patient variable to the database, and it'll create, that's when it creates that new record. And then we need to push it to local storage. So the first thing we do is change the variable, and then we push that variable to local storage by setting that item patient db and then we stringify it. Stringify db. And then we just want to let the user know that we did it. And then we want to reset run to 0 again. Right, so we did 4 functions before we tested anything. Let's see if we can get through here without messing something up, right? So save all, refresh, John Smith, let's put in here 4, 5, 20, 2000. How about that? Password, height, weight, male. Let's change this to female just to make sure it works. And add. And it did nothing. This is so awesome. I can't stand it when it doesn't work. Is it growing missing before condition? So this is really good if you can see my screen here. If, you know, for instance, you're clicking this, I probably have said this a few times. If you're clicking a button and it ain't doing nothing, and you can't figure out what's going on or what went wrong, right click, go to inspect, and just look at your console down here at the bottom. And these red things are your alerts. Right here it says there's a missing parentheses somewhere, and over here you probably can't see it, but it says JavaScript 8111. So that means on line 81 there is a missing parentheses, and I'll zoom back in so you can see on line 81 right here, I forgot to put a parentheses in my if statement. So let's save that. I'll look back over here in the on a doohickey and refresh, put in a new password for Mr. John Smith, click add, and it still ain't working. Go back to the inspector, and I have another error, and it says that the patient ad is not defined. P-A-T-I-E-N-T ad. I go to my HTML, let's see. Maybe I spelled it wrong. P-A-T-I-E-N-T ad. So that should work. P-A-T-I-E-N-T ad. It doesn't look misspelled to me. JS 106. Check existing patient. EXISTING. Stand by.
2 very boring minutes later.
I think I found it. The patient in my, what I'm calling that function, it's a lowercase patient, but the actual function up top here is uppercase. I didn't do my camel case. One misspelling. Again, save all. Let's go back over here. Why does it do this? There we go. Close this inspector. Refresh the page. Give him another password. Add. Okay. Patient information has been added to the database. So we can check that. Again, right click, inspect, and the top, go in Firefox or Chrome, go to your storage. It looks different in Chrome. If you have trouble figuring out what it looks like, either go watch my video on this lesson from last year, or send me an email, I'll show you. Go to your local storage, your patient database, and the last object in your patient database should be John Smith. Yep, there you go. And he's a female. She's a female. It's a female. So we know it works. We know it's adding. Let's see if it is checking to make sure everything is in there. So if I do Jane Smith, just change the name, same birthday, password, but I left off the wait to see if the check user form function is working. And then I hit add, and it says all required information has not been entered. So know that check user form works. If we go back to John, and I don't remember what his weight was. Oh, I can look in the object here. His weight was, weight was taken out because I tried to submit it. It was empty. If we've got John in there and we click add, that is not right. It should check to see if there's an existing patient. And there is. John Smith and John Smith. So something is not working correctly there. It just keeps adding John Smith to the database, which is exactly what we were trying to avoid, right? So let's go back and figure out what we messed up here. I messed up. I say we. It's the royal we. My wife uses this all the time. So, what was that? Check existing patient. What is not working? Okay, I see. It's going to be kind of difficult, and it's going to be frustrating. When you're using this method to call the information on the page, you have to use the little hashtag here. And I forgot to do that. I'm hoping that is the only problem and everything will work from there. Let's save all. Go back over here, back out a little bit. And give John a new password. And if I click, did I refresh? Yeah, that's why I had to give him a new password. If I go to add, it says this patient is already within the database. Would you like to update the record? And you say okay. And because he's in there 5 times now, you get the message 5 times. But we've updated all of his records now. So if we go back, nope, not page source. If we go back to the inspect and look at the database, you will see that all of the records for John Smith now show his weight is 555, 555, 555, 555, because we updated every single record that had the same first and last name. Is it perfect? No. Could it be better? Yes. Is it good enough for this project? Absolutely. That, in my book, is a win and it works. That's what we're looking for. All right, so we've added patient data. We checked the forms. All we got to do now is make the search work and delete. So let's do delete first, just because I want to get rid of all those records now. Function patient IEMT delete. So this one is done with a try and a catch. I'm not sure if they actually cover this in the book. They probably do at some point. It's a fairly common programming thingy, but you're going to try some code. And if that code doesn't work, you have to catch the error. And just call the error E. And in this case, we're just going to send off an alert. It stops the function and avoids an error that would throw everything out of whack. The patient with that first and last name does not exist. So this would fire off in the event that you are pushing the delete button on with a first and last name in the HTML that is not in the database. So in the try, we're going to do if, and we're going to do a confirm, because if you delete something, it's permanent. So we want to make sure they know that they're deleting records. This will delete the client record from the database. New line. Are you sure you want to proceed? And if they click OK, we're going to iterate through that database. DB length I++. And every time we iterate through, we're going to look and see if the database first name with that index equals what's on the web page. And the last name. If it does, I'm going to grab that index. If the DB index, we're checking again to verify that we did it right and got the right index. So this first 4, we're going to iterate through the database looking at the first name and the last name of each record. If they are the same as what is on the what's in those inputs on the HTML file. That's what this says. This checks the database. This checks the HTML or the input. So if they're the same, we're going to capture that index. Then we're triple checking here because we've already, checked and made sure that when we added it and everything else. But we're triple checking here. So if the first name with that index is equal to what's on the HTML page, and I'm going to copy and paste here because this is annoying. And DBI last name val blah 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 blah. Just make sure you change this I to index because we're checking a specific index this time. The first time we were iterating through to get the index number. Now we're checking that specific index to make sure that we were correct and the one we grabbed before we delete that record. Then we're going to use a splice at that index 1. Just taking that one record out. What happened here? That DB is suspiciously got a green thing under it, and I don't know why. So I have probably messed something up. Oh, same thing I did last time. Parenthesis. There we go. So DB splice, blah blah blah. And then we're going to change local storage. We pulled it out of the DB variable. Now we're pushing that DB variable back out to local storage to change that record. Set that item. The item being the patient DB. The name of the record. And we're going to stringify. Every time we push it out to local storage, every time we change the variable, we can change the variable all day, but it doesn't actually change anything in local storage until you do this stringify and throw it out there to local storage. And then we're just going to clear that form. We use that that function that we created earlier to clear the form since the record's been deleted. And then send an alert just letting the user know, hey, you told us to delete it, so that's what we did. And that is all for the patient delete. Let's save all, refresh. And we got John Smith in here. Did we do the search yet? We have not done the search yet. So we have John Smith. He's in here like 6 times. Let's see what happens. Let's inspect. Back out. Oh, I didn't even have it zoomed in. I'm sorry. I'll zoom in on that in a second. So local storage, check in 9, 8, 7, 6, 5 is Bob. So 9, 8, 7, 6. There's 4 records to have John Smith in there. Let's see what happens when we push the delete button. Delete. It says this will delete the client from the database. Are you sure? When you click OK, it'll work. If you click cancel, it just cuts it off. That's the cat. Nope, that's not the catch. There's no else statement in there, so it just stops and nothing happens. But when we click OK, it should say some patient with that first and last name does not exist. Something's jacked up. Where? I wonder where that got messed up. I have to look at the code here. Tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this. I'm going to open up another. Try and get a fresh database on here. 127.0.0.1 semicolon 8080. Let's Go in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, enter. View source. No, not source. Do that too much. Inspect. And then go to storage, local storage. Check this. Okay. So when I closed the whole web page out and any page connected to it, the local storage cleared itself and then loaded itself again when I reloaded the page, because that load local storage function. So let's try this from the beginning. We want to patient data. We're going to add Bob Smith 0701 2000, password, height, male. We're going to add. Patient's been added to the database, and we know those other ones worked. We can go in here, local storage, patient, object 6, Bob Smith. So let's say we want to delete Bob Smith, and we hit delete. It will delete. Let's see if it works. Okay. And then it says a patient with that. So something's messy in here. It's not evening out, equaling up. Let's give me a second, see if I can figure out what the problem is.
5 minutes later.
All right, so I haven't figured out what the problem is yet, but I thought you might want to see a way that I'd like to troubleshoot, and I haven't covered any of this. We know that, let me close this. When we go to add, we want to edit it, right? Because it's already there. What happened there? We're trying to delete. That's right. Okay, so we're trying to delete it. It says, are you sure you want to proceed? So we know we get that far. We click OK, and it immediately comes back with this patient with that first and last name does not exist. Although we know it does. But we don't know. So what's happening in our code, this is that try catch statement that I was talking about. Something's happening. It's trying to run code, and it's breaking. And the catch is to throw up that alert. But we don't know where it's breaking. So we know it gets as far as the message asking you if you want to proceed. And what I like to do, I'll go into this loop. This might throw up a lot of alerts, but I will just throw in an alert here, kind of just trying to tell me where it's at. So it's inside the loop. So if I get this far and I get this alert, I know the code ran that far. I don't know where the error is, but I'm going to try and find out. So if I save this and then refresh this, try and delete that record, I get to the first message to confirm. I get the alert saying, okay, I'm inside the loop, so I know it's looping. Inside the loop, 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 because it's looping. And then it gets to somewhere and it says, okay, somebody with that stuff doesn't live here, whatever. So I will move my alert down a little bit. Let's put it in this if statement here and see if it fires off inside the if. File, save all, refresh, and then push delete again. Nope, it never gets that far. So something is probably wrong with this line 134 here. But I don't see it. Oh, there it is. See? Oh, I did it twice because I copied and pasted. Remember, you got to have that little hashtag when you're referencing like this. You got to have that little hashtag. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you solve a problem. If it works. That's a good way to troubleshoot stuff, to figure out exactly what line is throwing your stuff off. Save all, refresh, delete. Okay, the patient was deleted. There we go. Let me zoom back in on this. Remember, this is the, you got to have that hashtag in there, and I didn't have that little hashtag right there in either one of these lines, so it was messing up my code. Little hashtag, little colon. If you forget a bracket somewhere in your HTML, all that will really cause a big problem. It's got to be very precise. I mean, I don't necessarily know they call this a strict language, but it sure feels like it. So, back out, verify that old Bobby Smith was deleted from the database, local storage, patient database. Yeah, and he's gone. That record 6 is now gone. So that works. That's awesome. The last thing we got to do is make the search button function. So we will do a search. And this is, you're going to put in a first name and a last name, hit the search button, and it should populate the birth date, password, height, weight, and gender. Search database. All right, so this is where we're going to use that found variable, that the global variable up here. I don't know if you need it to be global or not, because it's only used in this. Same with the run, it's only used in this. So that's probably bad practice. You don't want to have something accessible, the variables accessible by functions that don't use them. That's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing. That's how it works here. So we'll do a little counter for I is less than db length, right? Because we're always checking that db. The db is the variable that holds all of our records in client data. Then we are going to check and see if the text first name dot val is equal to the dbi first name and do the same thing for last name. So if what is on the HTML page is the same as what's in the database for the first name and the last name, then we're going to do the thing. And then we're going to grab everything from the HTML document and put it into the database variable. So here we're going back to get an element by ID. Get that value and then throw it in the DB with the index, same index that we're working with, first name. And we're going to do that for all of the available data. So I'm just copying the whole thing over and changing it up to last name. Last. It's important that you remember what you're calling everything. So like the birth date, right? Was that birth date? And it's actually DOB in the database. The password was change password. And in the database, it's just password. So we store the actual password, but the variable, or what we put in the HTML, is the change password, because we're going to change it. I don't know. It made sense to me. Height, weight, one more for gender. Yeah, it was a DRPMF is what I called it in the HTML. And in the database, it is referred to as gender. And then we want to change that found to 1 so it'll stop looking. And then I actually want to, looks like I'm missing a bracket. It was, I don't know where it went. It's missing a bracket. Okay. If found does not equal 1, if we never get to that and it never equals 1, we just need to tell them, hey, there's no no patient in the database with that name. There is no in the database with that name. All right, so let's see if that works. I'm going to save all. You couldn't even see what I was doing that whole time. I'm sorry. This is the search database function. So if what's in the HTML, what did I just do? Control Z. If what's in the HTML was the same as what's in the database for the first name and the last name, we're going to grab everything from the HTML and then throw it into the database variable. So basically it's lurking for the first name. And you could probably actually get rid of these 2 lines right here because we're looking for the first name and last name. It's already in there. You don't have to change it. I'm just going to leave mine the way it is because it works, but you probably don't need those in there. It's redundant. And then if found, at the end, if it's updating a record, it's going to change found to 1. But if it doesn't, if found is not 1, then it's going to shoot that alert out and say, hey, there's nobody here by that name. All right, so file, save all. Let me get out of my close-up and open this up. So what are we doing? Search in the database. Now with this search thing, you can actually look at some of the other records that are in there. The first one was Anakin Skywalker. And we hit search, and it doesn't work. That is so awesome. Let's see. Inspect what's wrong. Uncaught reference area. Search database is not defined. Search. I can zoom in, that'd be funny. If I move this over here and upwards, here's my error. Search. Oh no, I can't see. I don't have a glass. Search database is not defined. Why? What is wrong with my search database? I thought it said something else. Search database or something. Search database. That is clearly defined right here. CARCHGATA. All right, stand by.
Thousands of tears later.
All right, sorry about that. I found the problem. This W right here was lowercase. I changed it to uppercase, and now everything works like it's supposed to. So, let me back out of this. Everything works now. So if I search for Steve Rogers, if I spell it right, I don't know if there's a D in it or not. Nope, no D in Rogers. Search for Steve Rogers, click search, all his information comes up. Same with like Anakin Skywalker. Search, all his stuff comes up. So that is all for this week. I want to keep this video short, but I also want to make sure that you guys understand what the stuff is doing in here. It's fairly complicated, especially for those of you who are learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all for the first time. I know this is a lot to take in. This is a long video, and you're probably gonna have to pause it and rewind it several times. But next week, it's important that all that stuff works, because next week we're going to do the graph and the recs. Why is these links not working? Something. It's always something. Next week we're going to do that, and it will look like, where is my index? There it is. Look like this. You have your password page, 1 2 3 4 5 6. That's Anakin's password. You open it up, you got your about page. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh my goodness gracious. Make sure you're using Node. This video has been fraught with disaster, and my recording software has been on the fritz too, so I apologize. Make sure you're using Node. So I want to show you next week's stuff. Open PowerShell, Node. Oh, it's already running. Of course it is, but it's not running where I need it to run. All right, it's running. 127.0.0.1 80.80. Okay, you got your password page. That should work. Your links should work for your doohickeys. Okay. And next week, when we put in patient data, like we're gonna add, you can add, edit, delete, all that good stuff. Now we want to be able to add a page. So if we search for Steve Rogers again, and we do a search, it's gonna then, next week our lesson is gonna be drawing on a canvas. So while this is called a graph, and generally a graph will look like this, we are not really taking date information and height and weight and all that good stuff to make a graph like this. Plus, these are really complicated, and I don't like them. There are very good plugins that you can use that will take all your data and do it for you, which is nice. So instead of doing this, we're actually just going to draw on a canvas. And when you search for somebody, a patient, and you go to the graph page, I will give you this background, and I'm even going to give you the coordinates that these shapes need to hit. I'll give you all that stuff so you don't have to think about it. But you're going to draw circles and lines, and they're going to line up and show you what the body mass index of whoever you're looking at is. And also on the recommendations page, you're going to draw, I'm going to give you this picture, and you're going to draw this funky rectangle over, you know, whatever the thing is, if they're underweight, overweight, normal, whatever. For instance, if I look up Carol Danvers and search, and then I go to the graph, you see these change dynamically. The recommendations change, the background changed to a female, and the box is drawn over the normal spectrum because that's where her BMI is. So that's what we're going to do next week. So it's important that you learn this week's stuff and know what's going on. If you have any questions, please send me an email. I'm happy to do some tutoring if need be, and I can find the time. But yeah, that's it. Thanks.